Pastimes, creative outlets, avocations, whatever you call them, hobbies are a part of our lives, and they are part of what keeps us, I think, sometimes sane or overwhelmed, depending on how much you get involved in your hobbies in comparison to your work and to other things that go on in life. Yeah, there's so much to talk about. We're going to talk about it today, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to want to hear from you. So put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation because it's time for Coffee Breaks with Steve. Well, welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve. I, of course, am Steve, and this is the show where we come together around our virtual coffee table each week and join the conversation to talk about interesting topics with amazing guests. If you are joining us for the first time today, welcome. And if you've been with us before, welcome back. Yeah, we're going to be talking about hobbies today. And to get into that, I want to bring my co-host into the conversation here. Karissa is, as you know, a regular part of Coffee Breaks with Steve and directs the show, and as well as serving as a guest host and a co-host on numerous occasions. And hi, Karissa, how are we doing?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I've got, what I need here. It was a
You got your
busy week.
coffee.
I got my
It
coffee. It was a
was.
busy week. There's just been a lot going on, and we're going to get into our sweet and savory, or Chelan calls it, the charcuterie here in a minute.
Charcuterie.
The charcuterie. But how was your week? You had a lot going on with family, a sick daughter, and work, and
Yeah,
other activities, and
it's been a
your
long
whole
week. We just, when kids get sick, they always manage to do it in the middle of the night. So
yeah.
that's how
So
our
that
middle of the week started, is at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, sick
no.
child, and it's kind of would just kind of progress through
I'm
that. But
kind of glad I'm past that. We other than when we have grandkids visiting, family visiting,
which we've
it
gotten sick at your house
we
too, we've
gotten
managed to
it's
do. So
happened when we've had family visiting. But for the most part, with just Carol and me, we if one of us is sick or both of us are sick, we just shut down. We just isolate. We don't have to necessarily take care of each other. There have been a few times when one of us has been sick enough or going through something that required the other one to play nurse for at least a period of time, but somehow it's a little bit easier. Well, it's easier for me with Carol. When
right,
Carol has to take care of me, I'm a guy, so that means I'm
you get the
going to
man
act as
flu.
if, yeah, is that if I'm sick, it's like the end of the
You get
world.
legitimately sick. I have to say this about you. You're one of those people that will get sick out of nowhere and it like puts you down. When you're sick,
Exactly.
you're legitimately sick. I've seen, and you still function. As much as you feel like crap, you still function. So
Well,
you don't really man flu, you real flu.
yeah, I try to keep it that way, but I'm sure that there have been many times when my moaning and groaning is a little bit on the advanced side. I do want to just say hello to a few people before we get to our sweet and savory. Chelan is here this morning. We already said hello to Chelan. I see we've got somebody here. I don't know the
We're gonna
name
call them cow.
specifically.
Cow.
What's that?
KAO cow. We're gonna call them cow. KAO cow.
KAO,
Cows them
Kaoskin,
best
Besson. Anyway,
when we
welcome.
ignore them. Good morning.
Dee Dee is here. Good morning. Ahoy,
Hi,
Dee
Dee
Dee. Good to see you here.
Dee.
And Rick is here. So, yeah, if you're here,
Perfect.
please do say hello in the chat. We do ask, you saw a banner up there a minute ago. We do ask that we keep the conversation appropriate and relevant. We do moderate the conversation. And in fact, I'm going to make sure that we can see each other's comments, because there could also be people who are tuning in from the YouTube side, and we want to make sure that we can see their comments as well. I do want to get to our sweet and savory this morning, so we have time to get to the conversation. And we're going to reformat the chat on the screen then every time we do this. Sweet and savory, there are a few things that we wanted to talk about, because there's just things going on. For instance, how many of you tuned in and watched opening ceremonies or any of the early events that are taking place? The Winter Olympics officially got underway yesterday in Milano and Cortina, Italy. It was kind of cool during the opening ceremonies, because typically everything is taking place inside a huge stadium. And they did have that in Milan. But there were also in Cortina and a couple of the actual venues where they already have events going on, ski jumping and other things. They had like 4 different venues where they were simultaneously doing things, and the cameras would switch. So, for instance, for the marching in, the procession of the nations coming in, each time they would announce one of the countries, and their contingent would come in the big stadium in Milan. At the same time, they had like an archway in each of the other venues, and any of the athletes from that country who were there got to march in with the banner and their flag, and there were people lining the pathway there cheering them on. And so oftentimes during the Olympics, if you're at one of the other associated venues and you're not at the main stadium, you miss out on the whole marching in with your country and stuff. And so I thought that was really cool. And they, even because they have so much going on in both Milan and Cortina, when they raised the flags and lit the torch, they did it in both locations,
I thought
which
that was cool.
are very, very creative Italian. So
Very
that
creative. I hear that Jamaica's back with a bobsled team this year.
was a bobsled team this year. This is here's a picture from the Milan,
Very cool.
yeah, of the U.S. team coming in Milan. So yeah, it'd be cool to be there. I actually know someone who I work with when I'm doing standardized patient work at Washington State University who is there right now. He and his
Oh,
wife
very
are in
cool.
Italy usually a couple of times a year, and they actually, I know they had tickets to the opening ceremony, and they were going to be able to see
Oh, wow.
curling and I don't know what else, but
Oh, we love curling.
curling is great. It
We
gets a
love
bad
it.
rap, but it's a cool sport.
It's fun.
Super Bowl is tomorrow, and I'm
Super
curious
Bowl
if,
Sunday.
first of all, I think for our brew crew, the first thing is, are you even a football fan? Do you watch the football? Are you going to be tuning into the Super Bowl? And if so, are you rooting for the Seahawks, the Patriots? You don't care either way. You're just there for the commercials. What's your thing with the Super
Right.
Bowl? Or are you going to be skipping Super Bowl tomorrow to watch more of um, the Olympics? I couldn't remember the word there. I almost had to go back on the slide. Budweiser
What are we
Clydesdale
doing tomorrow?
Sunday in San Francisco. That's kind of cool too.
I love that.
So I
Yes.
love that. And every year it seems there is another really cool. I think the Budweiser commercials with the Clydesdales over the years have been among my favorites
They always have
for
good
those. So
ones.
yeah. What else is going on? This is actually a special day in our household. This is our Spokane anniversary. Today, 4 years ago today, is the day that Carol and I officially arrived in Spokane to start our new life
Wow.
here. And this picture was actually taken, I don't know, probably within the first few days that we were here. It's us standing behind. In the background, you see Alan and Kathy, your uncle and aunt's house, where we stayed for the first 4 months that we were here. We lived in their 4 years, Shalane. Yes, we got here on February 7th, 2022. So we've now
Wow.
been here 4 years. The time goes by so quickly. It's like telling
Yes.
people, when I talk to people from when we used to live in the Portland area before we moved to California, that when we talked about how long we'd been in California, how long ago we had left our church
Like,
in Tualatin
really?
and our house there. We were in California for like over 15 years,
Yeah.
between 15, 16 years. And people would go, no, it couldn't have been that long. Yeah, it was. We start talking about things that we did, like you guys in high school. We're
Yep.
talking, now we're going back a couple of decades.
Yep.
This is going to be Chelan. Let's see, no, this is 2 years ago was Chelan's 20
High
year.
school, 20 year.
So yours was like three. Yeah,
3 years
I'm
ago.
aging you guys.
That's okay.
Yeah, but
We're
anyway,
talking about ageism today as part of our conversation, so that'll be a good part of the topic.
it's going to come up in the conversation. Get ready for that.
You'll know how old I am.
Listen, do you have a special day this week? We didn't have on my calendar, we didn't have any birthdays or anniversaries on there. It doesn't mean that there aren't any among our brew crew. So if you have a special day this week that you would like us to acknowledge and to celebrate with you, you can put that in the chat right now. We will watch for that, and we will make sure that we give a big huzzah to you. And if you got one coming up maybe later in the month of February or later in the year, you can send us an email to cbwsteve@comcast.net. You see the email address up there right now. And we will make sure that we put that on our calendar so that when the proper week comes, we can celebrate that with you. So do let us know all of those things. All right. Listen, I want to get to our topic, Karissa, because it's one that has a lot of pieces to it. And we really want, I'm just going to tell the brew crew out there right now, watching and commenting in the chat, we want to hear from you. There are going to be some things that we're going to talk about, some things that we will hit upon that could even be a little bit controversial. I don't know. Our hobbies
Some hot
controversial?
takes. Hot takes.
Hot takes. But it's an interesting topic. We're talking today about hobbies. And some things are like, yeah, very definitely a hobby. But I think sometimes we don't even think about things that are part of our lives that would fall into that category. I'm going to start. I pulled up some information for this, but this is sort of a definition of what hobbies are. So this will help to equip you, brew crew, to answer in what your hobbies are. Because my philosophy is everybody has a hobby or hobbies. We may not think of them that way. I'm going to share some of mine in a few minutes that some of you are going to go, yeah, that's definitely one of your hobbies.
Yeah.
Hobbies are regular, enjoyable activities pursued during leisure time for pleasure, relaxation, or personal fulfillment rather than for profit or work. They are voluntary, creative, physical, or intellectual pursuits, such as gardening, reading, painting, or hiking, that act as a vital, stress-relieving escape from daily routines. You know, what's interesting about that, and again, I'm curious, and I'm seeing some people already putting some things in there, Shalane mentioning portrait embroidery. And I was
which she's
thinking
great
about that,
at.
Shalane, when you were here for the holidays, that for a while there, you were always bringing your embroidery set with you and doing that just while we were having conversations. Yeah, so Shalane, you're also talking about your other hobby being acting. And you know, if you're doing things like really participating in a community theater or like right now, Carol has joined the local chapter of the Sweet Adelines, which is an international female barbershop singing group, choir.
Yeah.
They have quartets, they have choirs, etc. And that's a hobby. She's not getting paid to do that, but it's something that she's doing that is bringing out some of her skills and her interests and her passions for singing and for music. And it's lots of times with, I mean, hobbies can be something you do individually. They can also be ways to connect socially. And one of the things it said there is that they're done outside of like your work. It's interesting. We're going to talk in a few minutes even about some ancient hobbies or things that even follow us today that grew out of ancient times. But it's interesting to me. We think of the difference between our work and our hobbies as being vocation and avocation. And it's interesting. Do you know that the Romans had two different words to talk about their work or political life? Politics being a big part of Roman work life, and their leisure time. And it was negotium was the work life, and otium was their leisure activity. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about some of the things that came from ancient times. But I'm curious, first of all, I'm just asking again for the brew crew out here to list some of your hobbies. And as we develop further in this conversation, some of your thoughts about hobbies versus work. You know, it says one of the things in that definition that I read said, pursued during leisure. Let's see, hobbies are regular, enjoyable activities pursued during leisure time. Do you ever find that there are overlaps between hobbies or those types of things and work? And I don't mean that's like you're skipping work. Well, you could be taking a day off from work, but that's part of that, you know.
I'm doing that. I'm taking a day off of work to do a hobby.
Are you?
I am, for my birthday.
Yeah. I just think that the other thing that came to mind is that, and I'm curious whether this applies to anybody who's watching, but that a hobby can develop into a monetized activity. I've known people who are doing acting, you know, who have a hobby around crafting, around sewing, around doing any number of things that they pursue as a hobby, and then have an opportunity to turn that into a career in some fashion.
People who do, we watch a lot of reactors on YouTube, people who've turned reacting to videos into their full-time jobs.
Well, and I mean, you know, the reality is this show is a hobby of mine. Right? This is,
we don't make any money off this, people.
I don't make any money. I do not make any money doing this. We don't have any sponsors, paid sponsors. We have not set up any kind of like a Patreon site or buy me a coffee or anything to ask people to pay in any way, shape, or form for this. And I've done this. I mean, now I'm supposed to be retired. I'm tracking time on the various part-time work things that I'm doing, and I'm not going to tell you how many hours I've spent.
It's more than when he was working full-time.
Probably. But, you know, in retirement, I'm doing this show, and it is if I track the hours spent in putting coffee breaks together, there's significant time spent. We're going to get into that in a few minutes too, but even before I retired, this show got underway, and it actually started as an adjunct to the work I was doing at the time. I was running my own consulting business to advise and work with nonprofits to help them. And a marketing expert I was talking to said, you need to be doing a weekly live stream on Facebook.
He said,
to attract clients. So this kind of started as part of my work. It drifted away from there because we found that really the things we wanted to talk about and the directions we were going were not related to my day-to-day work. And it took on a life of its own and continued. And it was a relief and a release from the work schedule. In a way, it still is, because I do still work part-time and do contract work. But the show is a hobby, and it could become monetized at some point. I'm not saying it never would, but that hasn't been the goal.
Right. That's not the point of it.
It's not the point of it. But, by the same token, and this also applies in the case of coffee breaks, something that started as part of your work can ultimately become a hobby. You move on to a different career, you retire, whatever the case may be. You still may have an interest in some aspect of what you did as work that you enjoyed and would like to continue to pursue as an activity. And I'm curious whether any of those things, Alda Glovins enjoy karaoke, which again grew out of another hobby of really all of ours, that we've all at various times been involved in choir, been involved in singing.
Music or something.
And the karaoke, somewhat to a great degree, I think, grew out of that because we're a family that likes to sing together. And so we'd get together. We have a setup in our basement here. When we get together for the holidays, we get together during the summer, there is almost always a karaoke night.
Yep, as long as we have time in the schedule, we'll karaoke.
And we'll make time in the schedule because it's family activity. It's a joint hobby. And there are things.
Petting cats counts as therapy. I'm just letting you know.
Where did she put that?
She wanted to know if it counts as a hobby. I said it counts as therapy.
Yeah. But again, that's part of the thing with hobbies too, is that they can be therapeutic, right? They can be, you might pursue them. And again, some people develop a hobby because they started doing something that was prescribed for them or recommended as something for emotional health, even for physical health. Some people get into, started doing an exercising routine, got into, we're told, listen, at post-injury, you need to do stretching, do some yoga. And then they really get into yoga, and they start going to yoga classes, or they start doing it at home, or whatever else. So many hobbies are intertwined with other things in life. And I'm here. We're hearing a lot from Shalane, but I would like to hear from. And by the way, thank you, Rick, for the everybody drink a few minutes ago there. Karissa, when I do want to mention a few old and ancient hobbies, some of which seem weird to us now, and some of which we would go, okay, yeah, I mean, that's something that we now do today, and we didn't know where it came from. As an example, cave art. By the way, the other thing about a lot of these that were in ancient times is cave art is both art, but it was part of their recording their history. It was storytelling. It was, and there were people, usually men, back in ancient times, but there were people who, that was kind of their job. Their role was to be the scribes, to be the recorders. We see that throughout history. But the art that goes with this, even the use, even writing stories, being creative in terms of how are you writing or telling a story, expressing that creativity. So we see that ancient art, the idea, I mean, even think now about people who do tagging, graffiti, whatever you want to call it. There are mixed feelings about some of that, but it is still an outlet that is used. That for some people, you may go, why are people now messing up boxcars or the side of a building? They're vandalizing. And others would see that as art and see it as someone's hobby. And there are people who, we know there are famous people, Banksy and others, who have actually gained reputations for doing that. That graffiti art also grew into building side murals that you see all over the place. It was interesting a few years ago when Carol and I were in Croatia, we were in Zagreb, and we were with a local tour guide in parts of Zagreb. There is a lot of graffiti that's ended up on buildings and areas that you kind of look at and go, that must be really run down. And we asked our tour guide, who lives there locally, has grown up there, why they didn't just get rid of that. He said, well, many of us look at this as being a form of art,
Ah,
and it actually speaks to us.
interesting.
So, one person's trash is another person's treasure.
Right.
And some people collect trash as a
Some people
hobby,
do.
right? And
Sometimes
make
some
art
people that's
out
what
of
they
it.
do.
But it's, yeah. So, cave art grew into so many things. Instruments, playing instruments. In ancient civilizations, they invented some instruments that evolved into some of the things that we still have today.
Yeah.
But in ancient Rome, playing instruments, even buskers who would be out on the street, even people who would take their instruments and they would get together with other instrumentalists. So somebody might be playing a percussion instrument and someone else was playing a stringed lyre. And they'd say, hey, let's get together. And then someone else had some kind of a flute that they had played. They were forming garage bands.
Right, basically.
Way back in that time. So, these things that we look at and go, yeah, this is a modern hobby or a modern venture. And again, so many of them, they would eventually have an opportunity to maybe get asked to come in and play at an event and make money for doing it. But it would typically start as a hobby. Games. We think of games in ancient Egypt. They invented a lot of games that carried forward in one fashion or another, similar to what we have today. This is a picture of a game that there are modern versions of called Senet, Senet. It was an Egyptian game that worked in some ways similar to like cribbage or something like that. And sometimes we have a modern game and we go, oh, that was a cool idea. And the idea originated back in ancient times. Also, that chess and its predecessors are thought to have come from India. Chaturanga or Kataranga, I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced. Somebody who knows can correct me. Was a game that was part of the predecessor to chess and developed in India like 1,500 years ago or more. But this is a picture of a modern version. It is still played today. They've carried the rules forward. And from this, chess developed, where this game, Chaturanga, was with 4 quadrants that would move. Chess eventually became the opposing sides that would work against each other. And ancient chess and modern chess, the rules really haven't changed that much, to the best of what I could find out. But so many games, card games carried forward. There were even some of the sports games and sports themselves in ancient civilizations such as Egypt and Greece and Rome and throughout. I mean, you name any early civilization, sports and feats of strength and activities that involve physical prowess of some kind were part of it. We know that we're talking about the Olympics. The original Olympics were in Greece, and they had different. But again, a lot of these were tied to things that were important to their culture in other ways. Even board games were part of developing. Military people often played the board games because they were developing strategy and learning how opposition worked. The games of physical activity were very similar. Oftentimes it was the soldiers who were doing this. It was part of their training. And
it's like,
it still is today.
Highland Games, they did those because they weren't allowed to train with weapons. And so they would use
in
the
Scotland.
Yeah.
And so they learned to, instead of throwing a shot put, they would throw boulders. They would the caber toss and all of those things were both developing and showing their strength, but also their ability to utilize things in nature as a way of providing both defense and offense. So there you see these things. How about in Asia, in Japan, sumo wrestling has been around for centuries and was part of the activity. The other thing was that a lot of these hobbies, and we see this in ancient sport and modern sport, part of the hobby was the people doing it, and part of the hobby was the people coming to watch. Spectator.
You have to have an audience at some point.
Is being a spectator for something, can that be a hobby as well? And we know it can. We talked a few months back about fandom and about being part of a fan club. Hobbies too. Topiary and other gardening forms. Now, gardening again grew out of the necessity to eat.
Eat.
And so much of the gardening were developing crops, even floral gardening. A lot of the flowers were edible or were used in other things, in teas and other things. But the idea, gameplay is a form of, yeah, right, you get paid for that. So there are overlaps and there are things that evolve from one to the other. But topiary goes back centuries as well in cultures, in Asian and European cultures, where they would shape, and usually it was done, you see an example here, in areas that were like very wealthy people or royalty would have these done because it was a form of visual art, and it showed off their wealth because they could afford to have this done. And
Right.
that, but again, you see these things continuing, ice sculpting and other things that are a form of art, sand sculpting. Oh, okay, we're going to talk for a minute here. I'm going to get to this. I was looking at some unusual hobbies, and Victorian era came up quite a bit.
Okay.
Some that I don't have pictures of, but making jewelry out of hair. Some people may have heard of that, but they would strand hair together, and sometimes some of these, so much of this in the Victorian era, I don't know if there were ties to things that were going on with the Black Plague, and I don't know,
Right.
but a lot of these were tied in one way or another to death. So oftentimes the hair strand jewelry, it didn't have to be, but it was sometimes made from a lock of hair from a person who had passed away. And it was a way, and people still do that. They'll collect a lock of hair and put it, a little strand of hair and put it in a locket, a clear locket or something, as a way of keeping a part of a loved one. But one of the things that was popular in Victorian times and carried forward for a while after photography was invented was that when a family member died, they would gather around and get a picture with the deceased person, or just getting pictures of deceased people after they had died. And there was an entire activity around doing that. Now, the reasons, again, might not have been, hey, that would be fun, let's do that. But it was tied to doing something that it's even like telling the stories through cave art. It had a purpose. This was a way of hanging on to a memory of that person. It was something that was they both found it to be comforting in some way. To me, if I look at it personally, I say that's creepy. I don't want to picture, it'd be like me going, yeah. For me, it would be like I go to an open coffin funeral, and when I get to seeing the viewing of the dead person, I stop and do a selfie. That would just be weird, and it seems to me unnatural. For them, it was very natural, and it was a way of holding on to that person. There was also a spiritual aspect. There was a lot also in that era.
The photos held the soul
held
of the
spirit.
Person.
And they would, but a lot of things during that era too were tied. A lot of even the hobbies were tied to spiritualism. Things like having seances and doing those types of things were very much tied. Another one that was big, and some people actually still do this or collect these, but there was a trend during Victorian times to do what is called anthropomorphic taxidermy.
Yes.
Where they would stuff animals, but they would put them in human poses of one kind or another.
Activities.
Make them look like they were doing some kind of human activities. There's a picture, and people will find these now and collect them, and they actually have, in some cases, a value if they've been well kept. But they would take different rodents. Rodents were popular.
Is very judgmental. I would like to point out.
I know it's doesn't. I don't know what the deal is there, but they're not getting along. But you will see a lot of these. You can look these up. Anthropomorphic taxidermy, and you'll see a lot done with rodents, mice, rats, squirrels, and other rodents that were posed. Amazing and upsetting. I don't disagree with you at all on that one. But there are a variety of things that we still to this day carry forward with some of those. Taxidermy is both an occupation for some people. You see the results of that. You go in someplace and somebody has the deer or the antlers of the deer that they shot, and they kept that. Yeah. They cut the meat up so they had venison to eat, but they would mount the head or the antlers as a trophy. Yeah. Stuffing, you can go into museums and you'll see, there's the Natural History Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. has actual animals that have been preserved and taxidermed, I think is the term. But wanted to share a few common categories, so it might prompt some people throwing some things in. Categories of hobbies, and these are just a few. Creative and artistic, activities that involve making or expressing something new, such as drawing, painting, photography, creative writing, playing a musical instrument. Do any of these apply to you? Talk about them here. Physical and athletic, hobbies that involve movement and exercise like running, yoga, hiking, swimming, team sports. Intellectual, pursuits that challenge the brain, including reading, solving puzzles, chess, other games, learning a new language, Karissa, or
Amen.
coding, collecting things, the act of gathering specific items such as stamps, coins, antiques, or rare books, or in my case, socks,
Socks,
gnomes,
gnomes, moose,
mooses. I have
Grimson.
collections, and these weren't things I grew up collecting, but they become things that I've done and I wear. I mean, I have some cool looking socks on today. I'm not holding my foot up in front of the camera. Outdoor in nature, activities done in natural environments such as gardening, bird watching, fishing, camping. Social hobbies centered around community and interaction like volunteering, joining a book club. We did an episode on book clubs a while back, or attending trivia nights. And there can be overlaps with these others because I think that there are some hobbies. I mentioned Carol joining the Sweet Adeline's chapter. That's both an outlet for her as a hobbyist singing, but also it's social. She's with other
Yeah.
women who are part of that group. And so much of what we do. Why do hobbies matter? We kind of talked about this a little bit too. But engaging in a hobby provides several life improving benefits: stress relief, an escape from daily pressures, and help in recharging mental energy. We're going to talk in a minute about when hobbies themselves can become an overwhelm. Skill development helps you learn patience and precision while mastering new crafts. And again, it can develop into something beyond. Social connection offers opportunities to meet people with similar interests and build community. We talked about fan clubs a while back, book clubs. Mental health, regular participation can reduce the risk of depression and boost self-esteem. I want to hit on a few things while we've got time. And I know there's some things you want to bring up, Karissa, but we talked about some of the weird and unusual hobbies and why they're healthy, but hobbies also can become like, I know people who've gotten into hobbies where, well, do you remember the one hobby that goes back to our family as well, which we haven't done for a few years, but the Garlic Dance Film Festival. We were doing
Yes,
our own
we did
film
that for a
festival,
long time.
and the cost in time and in equipment and props and costumes to pull those together on an
Yep.
annual basis. I mean, at one particular stage, I bought a semi-professional video camera, lights,
Yep.
and other equipment, boom microphone and stuff. I mean, I literally, I say I because I was the one who prompted. I mean, it was out of Carol's and my budget together, but I literally spent
Mom went with it.
a few $1,000s over a period of probably 2 or 3 years. And I still have a lot of that equipment. I just don't use it as regularly. That's the other thing. What about people who golf? Golf can be an expensive hobby. Fishing can become an expensive hobby, depending on a variety of factors. Some of them can be done very much on a shoestring and still be very effective and very enjoyable. But sometimes it's like, oh, okay, if I'm going to continue to pursue this, now I need to invest in this and go to the next level, right? Another couple of things I want to talk about. I know you wanted to bring these up. But I think it's good. I'm just going to drop this and ask people to respond. If you have a hobby, been involved in a hobby, or know someone with a hobby where it has become too much of something, too expensive, too time consuming, too overwhelming. It's something that has moved from being a hobby to an obsession.
Right.
And that can happen with anything, right? I'm curious whether anybody has any awareness of that. What about benefits of having something that would not be considered a mainstream hobby? And we've shared a few of those, but Karissa, your thoughts on that?
This is my wheelhouse. I am one of those people who tends not to get into mainstream things, at least not when they're mainstream. I am the kind of person who very much is a niche hobby person. And I think that there's first you have to ask yourself what makes something a niche hobby versus a mainstream hobby. Mainstream hobbies, people think about, athletic activities, going to the gym, is considered a mainstream hobby. Football, being a football fan or a major sporting fan. Soccer right now is really, there's soccer community
Pickleball.
fandom. Pickleball is becoming big. So what makes those things mainstream versus a niche hobby? And there's a couple of factors in it. One, how widely is it shared and marketed? Marketing plays a really big factor in how people see leisure activities and how people pursue leisure activities.
Yeah,
There's
and
whole
also I think
industries.
social and cultural acceptance.
Yes,
And
because
I know
there
you
are
want to talk
places in
about
the
that a little bit.
world where certain things are considered mainstream, where in other places in the world they would not be.
Yeah.
For example, one of my hobbies, my whole room is decorated in K-pop paraphernalia.
Which is
That would be considered
Korean
Korean. So in
pop groups.
Asia, the way that the music industry and fandoms are pursued is very different than in the Western world. Now,
Yeah.
to some people, that would seem really cringy and weird and very niche, and like, why are you wasting your money on that? You're 41 years old. See, I told you my age by the end of today. But if this was all football stuff for my favorite football team, nobody would have anything to say about it, because that's mainstream. That's considered acceptable. It's totally fine to get emotional and scream and shout at your television screen while you're watching a sporting event, but going to a K-pop concert is like, what are you doing? That kind of thing. So that's a factor in terms of how things are marketed, how they're seen culturally, and how they're
Yeah.
experienced. So that's something that I think when you look at a more niche hobby, if it's something that you've always said to yourself, I would never be interested in that, maybe take a step back and ask yourself, why wouldn't you be interested in it? Is it because you just don't see it as something that you're interested in, or is it something that you see as less acceptable? And if so, why is that?
Yeah. And I mean, I think to some degree, again, it comes back to that. And I don't know, I might push back on what you're saying a little bit and say that, as we've looked at some of these, I think that there is a factor that there are certain hobbies that everybody automatically goes, oh yeah, it's a hobby. I mean, coin collecting
Mm-hmm.
as an
Yeah.
example, or, hiking.
Collecting
If you
making model trains or
make
something.
model trains or, yeah, model trains is another good one that can also, by the way,
That's a good
become
one.
very expensive.
Very
Um,
quickly.
but I think any hobby can. Any
Mhm.
hobby can become to something. But I don't know. I think I would push back a little bit on that only because I think I don't really disagree with what you're saying, because I do think that there are some that are just more common.
Mhm.
But I think any hobby can be a niche hobby in that what you're doing I mean, if somebody is really into skydiving,
Right.
and that's their hobby, and they do that, they get out and skydive once a week, and and they've gotten certified to, they're not making money doing it, but they just go out and do that.
They just love it.
Bungee jumping, seeing how many football stadiums, NFL stadiums in the country they can
They can
visit and
travel
get a
to.
memento from. um, for me, if somebody else is doing something that I struggle to think of as something I would do, I might look at it as a niche hobby, even if it's something relatively common, right? Because we all have our own filters and stuff.
Right.
I want some either pushback from our brew crew or
Sock collecting.
validation on what I'm saying or what you're saying, because I do think that there is some truth to all of that. I mean, I think that there are some that are more recognizable. What about people who do cliff camping? You seen those
That
pictures? That freaks me
well,
out.
we have a fear of heights, so
Yeah, but I mean, but fear of heights aside, I mean, people are gonna,
like, but why
we're
though?
gonna put a little shelf and hammer it into a cliff, and we're gonna put a tent on it that barely
Right.
fits and sleep in that. And during the middle of the night, boy, you better not be a sleepwalker.
No.
Or get
You
up,
better strap
not
yourself
remembering
in
where you
real
were and say,
good.
oh, I have to go to the bathroom. And you get up and walk out of the tent and fall 3,000 feet. Anyway, there are certain things I just go, really? You would do that?
Right.
But I
But
mean, I've never been a golfer. I know people that they love to golf. I matching polo shirt colors. I see that what's happening here is Chelan is
Glenn is
throwing
outing all of your
all
hobbies.
of mine. She's not
Yeah, I
outing
haven't
anyone
seen
else's
any
right
of
now.
mine.
Yeah. One other thing, Karissa, you brought up as we were discussing this was men's hobbies being kind of
Mhm.
more accepted than women's hobbies. And I'm curious what you think about that, because I might want to push back on that one a little bit too.
So this one I'm going to pull my notes up for because I want to. So there is a conception that women dominated hobbies often get judged more harshly than male dominated hobbies. We brought up football and sports, for example. And, it's considered, at least in the Western world, very normal for men to invest a lot of time, energy, and emotion into things like that. But
Yeah.
then, when women focused hobbies come into the picture, they're not taken quite as seriously historically. Society has a track record of really treating things associated with women as kind of trivial or frivolous, things like, people who are into romance novels. We mentioned K-pop, so
Right.
boy bands. Fashion and beauty is a hobby, but people kind of, if you're not into that world, people tend to turn their nose up at it as, insignificant. Fan fiction, scrapbooking, crafting, things like that. But a lot of these
Right.
hobbies require a good deal of knowledge, creativity, analysis, budgeting, even technical skills. And I think that when people think about a hobby, they don't always factor in all of those things
Yeah.
that play into it. But also, emotional expression by women historically is taken less seriously. I mentioned screaming at a television or a football game is considered totally normal when it's in the sphere of a male dominated hobby. But
Right.
screaming at concerts, you talk about Beatlemania or the reactions to Elvis, things like that are seen as overhyped and just like out of control and just kind of brushed off as not really having any basis. Um, One of the things that's noted in here is shipping fictional couples. That's something that happens in the K-pop industry a lot, where
Right.
where you connect people just by their
People.
interactions, and it's just a kind of a fun thing that people like to do. But people
Yeah.
kind of turn their nose up at it. Um,
Well, and I think about, I do think about things, like, for instance, a lot of things are also gender identified as hobbies,
mhm.
even though they might be, either person might do them.
Yeah, only for women or only for
Only for women or only for men. It kind of
only
goes
for
back to,
little
can
kids,
boys
only
play
yeah,
with dolls and can girls play with Hot Wheels cars,
yeah,
But I mean, I think about things like sewing as
yeah.
being identified automatically as a woman's hobby, just one
Yeah.
example. Or
Makeup
yeah,
has been one of those things
right,
in recent years that
hairstyling or
has been a
something. What
very yeah.
about, for, we think of certain things like certain sporting events,
Mhm.
particularly, or physical activities, being more toward men.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily the case. A couple of things I want to mention, because we are going to have to close. I'm just going to throw these out there as sort of follow-ups. One, in the definitions that I read, they talked about volunteering. And I just know from my own experience with nonprofits, I wonder about this question. We're not going to answer it here, but is volunteering and volunteerism more tied to hobby, or is it more tied to work as
Mm.
and that may be more of a subjective situation, a subjective opinion. And I also just wonder about some of the situations. I put a couple of things in here, and I'm just curious about the idea that we maybe follow up on at some point, about whether there are things that we would say, I would love to be able to do whatever and add to the hobbies. I have
Right.
multiple hobbies. I don't think of them. I don't consciously go, that's a hobby. They're just things that I do, that I enjoy. They talk about, there are books out there that talk about the release of endorphins and the release of other things, and restricting more of the cortisol and other things that lead to stress when you are involved in some of these activities. And the question becomes, when you start to reach the point where the hobby itself is causing stress,
Yeah, when it's getting
what
you
do you do? Do
amped
you let
up
it
and
go?
like
How do we
stressed.
deal with those things? But anyway, there's a lot of things we could continue to talk about. I do appreciate, and I hope for those of you who tuned in live, you continue to think about these things, maybe drop some more comments in. We're going to put something, we'll put some things online too that people can respond to. And if you're watching this later, either on YouTube or Facebook, you can feel free to add your own comments as well. I do
Yeah,
want to
we want to
wrap
know
up
what your
because
hobbies
we are
are.
at time here, but I want to let everyone know what's coming up in the next few weeks. We do have some things lined up here on on coffee breaks for the next few weeks, and I'm excited about some of these. Next week is Valentine's Day, which can be controversial because some people who are single and in a variety of other situations view it as being like, oh, we got to go through that again. But we're going to have a fun conversation. Carol's going to join me. She has joined me before for conversations, I think even in the past few years back, a Valentine's conversation. But we're going to be talking about this from a slightly different perspective. Yes, we're going to share our story and stuff, but we're going to talk about kind of what we've learned along the way as we're coming up this July on 46 years of being married. What are some of the things we learned along the way that dispelled some of the early fairy tale concepts? And they're not going to be negatives, but it's just a different way of looking at how love and relationship continues to develop. And even if you are single, I hope you'll tune in for that one, because I think a lot of it ties to a lot of different things. A couple of weeks out, Eliz Green, an author and an expert. We were talking a little bit about stress and stress management today, but she has written books on dealing with stress. She has an amazing story herself, and she has a very, very practical approach to thinking about how we recognize and manage stress. We not eliminate it, but manage it, and looking at what stress brings to us, both as positives and things that can cause issues if we don't know how to manage it. 3 weeks out, we're going to be talking to a lady by the name of Alexa Tomkoviak, who is currently pursuing her master's degree in creative writing. And you think, so, okay, what's there to talk about there? Well, we're going to talk about what it takes in this day and age for a student, for someone who is looking to pursue advanced degrees or any kind of a degree, in terms of the cost in money and in time, and why that's important. What does she want to do with that? A degree in creative writing. Does she want to become an author? Does she want to become a college professor? It's one of those stories that I think you're going to appreciate and enjoy, no matter what your stage of life is and what the things are that you're pursuing. And then we go out into the beginning of March, and we're going to be talking to at least one person, maybe more than one person, from this theater that has grown up in Oregon outside of Portland, called the Experience Theater Project. And this was one Karissa brought in. And it is a theater program that has been around now for a few years, but they're really taking off now. And their entire theater is built around audience immersion, doing things that are audience interactive and doing things that break out of the stage and actually involve the audience. And there have been theater programs around in theater and some plays that have done that, but they are really focused on that. We're going to be talking to them about that and what's involved. What are the topics you'd like to discuss? I just said Karissa brought that one to us. Who are the guests you would like to see? You may know somebody. You may come across a person or a topic. You may even run across it on social media and go, that is cool. Let us know about it. And if you can reach out and make an introduction, or you know someone and you can make that introduction, do that, please. So many of you who are right here in the Brew Crew chat right now have done that in the past. Keep your creative mind and thinking cap on for coffee breaks. You run across something interesting, a story, a person, let us know about it. You can send us that email at cbwsteve@comcast.net and spread the word. Spread that word, which reminds me, we're on YouTube as well as Facebook. Some of you may be watching from YouTube today. Our YouTube channel is the place where this Brew Crew chat is our intimate place around the coffee table that takes place on most weeks. But the YouTube channel is where we can get some of these topics and some of our guests out in front of a much broader audience. If you go there and subscribe, that helps to get us more visible. The algorithm goes up. If you're already subscribed and you share this with other people and let them know about the channel, and maybe share some excitement about a particular topic or guest, that maybe they will subscribe. We've seen subscriptions going up. We'd like to get more, not because I want to promote myself, but because so many of our topics and guests are worth other people seeing, and we want to make sure that word gets out. So I encourage you to do that. I thank you for doing that. Karissa, thank you so much for being here and for joining in this conversation today. This is a lot of fun. And for all of you out there doing the same thing, thank you for participating. Any last words, Karissa, before we sign ourselves off and get on with our weekend?
I really just encourage anybody who is watching this afterwards to get into the chat and let us know what your hobbies are, because one of my favorite things is finding out one of the hobbies that I recently just started doing, I got into because somebody else shared that that was their hobby and it intrigued me. And so I'm always loving to hear about different hobbies I've never heard of before. So let us know what they are because sharing
I
is caring,
agree.
y'all.
Sharing is caring, and that, brings us to kind of our final thought, and that is, as we share who we are in any number of ways, we touch lives. And all of us can do that, and we should do that. Whatever your passions are that can do something for someone else in some way, reaching out to a neighbor, reaching out in your community, reaching out in the world. It can even be with the hobbies that are a part of your life. So please find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week. Thanks, Karissa. And thanks to all of you. And we'll see you next time on Coffee Breaks with Steve.